Harold is 70 years old and recently retired from a long career running his family's cafe. Over his working years, he saw many longtime patrons move from middle to late adulthood and begin to deal with a variety of health problems. Now he is fully aware that he too is an older adult. Still, he doesn't really feel old. Aside from a few stiff joints and some minor aches and pains, he feels like his regular self. He is, however, slightly concerned about his cognitive ability. He has always been a bit absent-minded, but recently any time he has misplaced something or had a memory lapse, he has wondered whether this is just occasional forgetfulness or a sign of more serious things to come. Harold's retirement has gotten him thinking about how the next phase of life will go. Even though he has some idea of the changes to expect, he also knows life is unpredictable. He's aware of medical conditions that run in his family, like glaucoma, high blood pressure, and Alzheimer's disease. And he hopes he'll be able to identify and get treatment for these things early if he develops them himself. He resolves to stay on top of his medical appointments and continue to get regular checkups. Harold wants to live long, but he also wants to be healthy while doing so. He has several questions on his mind. How long can he maintain his good health? Will he notice slow and gradual declines in his physical or mental abilities, or will sudden health events drastically change his life? Should he be concerned about forgetting little things now that he is older? Most of all, he thinks about the rest of his life and how long it might last. Could he have 20 or even 30 years ahead of him? This chapter describes research that examines changes to the physical body, health, cognitive ability, and abnormal cognitive declines in late adulthood. Myra has reached a significant milestone, her 91st birthday. She celebrated it with her children, who are in their late 60s, her middle-aged grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, who range from adolescents to emerging adults, and one great-great-grandchild, a particularly rambunctious toddler. Myra's family is a snapshot of most of the stages of the human lifespan. As her loved ones revisit over family photos and videos, they smile and joke about the physical changes they see in each other today, compared to the images from 20 or 40 or 60 years ago. This section on physical aging in late adulthood covers the ways the many different systems in our bodies physically change with time, including muscular, skeletal, sensory, nervous, respiratory, and cardiovascular systems. Research on life expectancy, as well as theories about how and why people experience changes in later life, help us to understand these processes. Life expectancy. Human beings know that life does not last forever. Figure 15.2. Having passed through infancy, childhood, adolescence, plus early, emerging, and middle adulthood, everyone will experience late adulthood with declines in physical ability and health, eventually resulting in death. These changes may sound stark, but there are many reasons for optimism. Research studying human longevity or life expectancy, the average age to which members of a species or subpopulation within a species will live, has revealed consistent positive trends over a long period of time. In fact, average human life expectancy has been steadily increasing worldwide for the past 100 years, from 34.1 years in 1913 to 71.0 years today, Datani et al. 2023. This dramatic jump is likely due to decreases in infant mortality, improved living conditions, improvements in both quality of and access to healthcare, preventative measures such as vaccinations, and improved knowledge of health and nutrition. The gap in life expectancy between wealthier regions, which have more resources and more access to healthcare, and poorer areas of the world has also decreased over time, although there is still variability. Australia/Oceania has the highest life expectancy of 79.4 years, and Africa has the lowest of 61.7 years, Datani et al. 2023.1. In the United States, average life expectancy is around 79 years, and women live 6 years longer than men on average. This tendency for women to live longer than men is also observed globally. A February 2020 report from the U.S. Census Bureau projected that life expectancy will likely continue to increase for the next 40 years, surpassing 85 years by the year 2060, Medina et al. 2020, figure 15.3. However, while projections are optimistic, future improvements in life expectancy are not guaranteed, and a variety of factors could influence them. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic was responsible for a global decline in life expectancy, ranging from 1 to 2.5 years. Arias et al. 2022, Datani et al. 2023. Rising rates of obesity are also associated with lowered life expectancy in both developed and developing nations, Bonsall and Jin, 2023. Researchers also find variations in life expectancy within regions and populations in the same country. For example, in the United States, the highest income individuals tend to live more than 14 years longer than the lowest income individuals, Chetty et al., 2016, and differences based on race and ethnicity are observed. Socioeconomic status accounts for most of the observed racial and ethnic differences in longevity, for the Health ABC Study 2012. Group differences in financial stability, housing and neighborhood factors, education, community support and safety, health insurance, and access to healthy food and high-quality healthcare all likely contribute. Kaiser Family Foundation 2023. Some trends in the data are more difficult to interpret, however. In the United States, while Black residents have the lowest life expectancy at birth, this gap tends to narrow over the lifespan. After surviving to age 80 years, Black Americans tend to live longer than white Americans. This suggests that although Black Americans are disadvantaged in terms of life expectancy for much of the lifespan, those who reach advanced age may be more resilient than most. Hispanic Americans, in contrast, tend to have longer life expectancies across the entire lifespan. Arias and Shu, 2020. Understanding these group differences requires analyzing more factors than just socioeconomic status, such as lifestyle differences and genetic risk. National research on people of Asian and American Indian/Alaska Native heritage has only begun being collected in the last few years, with preliminary data showing the highest life expectancy for Asian Americans and the lowest for AIAN, Arias et al., 2022. Types and theories of aging. Researchers have identified different types of aging based on whether the process is typical or accelerated by disease or environmental influences. The most fundamental type of aging is primary aging, the natural process that has not been accelerated or worsened as a result of disease. Among its characteristics are subtle declines in processing speed and working memory and weakening of the skeletal and muscular systems. Biren and Cunningham, 1985. Othman et al., 2022. Interventions in primary aging would slow the aging process, but little progress to achieve this has been made. Most interventions have instead focused on preventive measures to improve health, allowing individuals to remain in primary aging while delaying issues that would lead to secondary or tertiary aging. Barnes et al., 2021. Carty et al., 2016. Cornelison and Otsuka, 2017. Next, secondary aging is accelerated and worsened by disease processes, lifestyle choices, or environmental factors. Biren and Cunningham, 1985. Othman et al., 2022. Rapid cognitive decline as a result of any form of dementia is an example of secondary aging, as are health problems resulting from a poor diet, a sedentary lifestyle, exposure to pollutants, and inadequate access to healthcare and other resources. This type of aging has been the largest focus of interventional efforts, including medical treatments to slow or reverse disease processes, lifestyle interventions to improve health, and social programs such as Medicaid/Medicare to open access to healthcare resources. Finally, tertiary aging describes the more rapid and general declines that may occur in the months and years prior to death. Biren and Cunningham, 1985. Othman et al., 2022. Examples include loss of mobility and terminal decline, the accelerated and non-normative declines in cognitive ability that can occur 1 to 5 years before death. Huller et al., 2016. Wilson et al., 2020. Theories of aging are researched and refined based on studies in genetics, biochemistry, and human and animal studies. These theories are continually evolving and do not paint a conclusive, universal picture. Many researchers recognize that causes of ages may vary and combine in the overall process of getting older and the development of age-related and other conditions. For example, the free radical theory, described below, may explain the development of certain conditions, but not others. It may be a definite cause of aging, but not a universal cause for all aging. Hormonal stress theory. Some theories and research on aging focus on the diseases and health problems that become more common in later years. One such theory, the hormonal stress theory of aging, also called neuroendocrine theory, Sapolsky, 1992, proposes that as people get older, stress hormones such as cortisol tend to stay elevated longer after a stressful response than they do at younger ages. Figure 15.4. These hormones have been positively correlated with hypertension, diabetes, cognitive decline, and cardiovascular disease. Novias et al., 2017. Fayer et al., 2021. Yaluris et al. 2019. It's therefore plausible that age-related increases in exposure to stress hormones could contribute to many of the health problems typically associated with age. While stress hormones have short-term benefits, such as preparing the body for fight-or-flight responses, research has shown that chronic exposure can have a direct negative effect on the health of many bodily systems. For example, cortisol alone has been linked to a variety of health issues, including depression, obesity, fatigue, cardiovascular health, and inflammation. These hormones may also lead to unhealthy behavioral responses, such as losing sleep or overeating during stressful times. O'Connor et al., 2021. Having a history of adverse childhood experiences is also associated with increased risk of negative health outcomes in adulthood, including cardiovascular disease, dementia, and depression. Dagnino et al. 2020. Godoy et al. 2021. Merrick et al. 2019. Tani et al. 2020. Free radical theory. The free radical theory focuses on free radicals, unstable oxygen molecules that are a byproduct of metabolizing the food we eat. Because they try to bond with other atoms or molecules to become stable, free radicals can cause small amounts of physical damage to tissues or cells as they attempt to stabilize. Ziada et al. 2020. The free radical theory suggests that this damage accumulates as people age, eventually resulting in many of the health problems associated with aging. Some believe we may be able to minimize free radical damage by increasing the intake of antioxidants, substances naturally produced in the body, and also common in many fruits and vegetables. Although some research supports the free radical theory, particularly with regard to specific conditions like cancer and heart disease, other studies have contradicted it. Research on antioxidants so far is less conclusive. Aversa et al. 2016, Jamova et al. 2023, Ziada et al. 2020. Cellular clock theory. The cellular clock theory suggests that cells can divide to reproduce themselves only a limited number of times. As they reach this number, the body is no longer able to replace old or damaged cells with new ones, theoretically resulting in many of the diseases and declines associated with aging. This idea was first developed by Leonard Hayflick, who discovered that cells could typically divide around 40 to 60 times before cell division stops, a constraint sometimes referred to as the Hayflick limit. Hayflick suggested that some mechanism in the cell operated as a clock that eventually stopped future divisions. Hayflick, 1977. The idea has led many researchers to conclude that, unless lifespan-extending interventions are developed, the maximum human lifespan is around 122 years. Blagasklani, 2021. What sort of mechanism would act as such a clock? Eventually, a potential answer has been found in telomeres. A telomere is the strand of DNA on the tip of each chromosome. Telomeres protect DNA, somewhat like the ends on shoelaces that keep them from unraveling. However, telomeres become shorter each time a cell divides, eventually becoming too short to serve their protective role, so the cell's ability to divide ends. Shea and Wright, 2000. One compelling bit of evidence supporting the cellular clock theory exists in a rare genetic condition called progeria, affecting around 1 in 4 million individuals. Figure 15.5. Progeria causes young children to develop many health problems and features typically associated with age, such as hair loss, joint problems, heart problems, fatigue, and shortness of breath. The skin and facial features also resemble those of older individuals, and the life expectancy of affected individuals is typically 12 to 13 years. Hennicum, 2006. One of the characteristics of this condition is shorter than typical telomeres. Alsop et al., 1992. Decker et al., 2009, providing strong evidence that telomeres play a role in the normal physical aging process. Wear and tear theory. Another theory takes a more global and environmental look at physical aging. The wear and tear theory suggests that the use of our bodies results in unrepaired damage that accumulates over time, resulting in aging. However, the idea does not account for the body's ability to repair and fix damage throughout life, Lipsky and King, 2015, and research does not provide strong support for this theory. In fact, more active humans and other species generally tend to be healthier and live longer, suggesting that the more we use our bodies, the longer they last. Middledorf, 2010, Satar et al. 2020. Still, some research has suggested that although wear and tear may not explain the aging process overall, it could explain some age-related experiences. For example, athletes who engage in intense levels of activity might be at greater risk for joint problems later in life. Davies et al. 2019. Thus, It's plausible that joint problems in later life could at least partly be predicted by extreme use and damage, consistent with the wear and tear theory. Genetic variability. Other research has focused on the idea that genes may play a role in physical and biological aging. Link figure 15_01_age 70, link. Part of this idea is based on knowledge about diseases that have a genetic component, such as breast cancer, coronary artery disease, and Huntington's disease. Inheriting a genetic tendency for one of these conditions can affect a person's life expectancy and how well they maintain functioning with age. However, many research studies suggest that just the longevity of close relatives can be predictive of your own life expectancy. One such study demonstrated in a very large sample of over 20,000 individuals that having close relatives who survived to the top 10th percentile in longevity was strongly associated with living longer. This relationship did not exist for relatives who were not genetically related, such as spouses and in-laws, suggesting the relationship is largely genetic and not due to shared environments and lifestyles. Van den Berg et al., 2019. Some evidence exists that variations in several specific genes, such as the APOE gene, are associated with longevity. Medline Plus, 2022. Table 15.1 summarizes possible causes of biological aging. Changes in the body. So far, you've learned about theories attempting to understand and describe the physical aging process. The physiological changes during late adulthood affect various areas of the body. Changes in muscle and bone can affect mobility. Sensory abilities in vision and hearing may change. The appearance of skin and hair often shows signs of aging, and internally, aging can affect organs like the heart and bladder, and also result in changes within the brain. Musculoskeletal changes and mobility. The skeletal system is maintained by processes that create new bone tissue while removing old, maintaining bone density for most of the lifespan with the help of the sex hormones testosterone and estrogen. As levels of these hormones decline with age, however, so does our ability to maintain bone density. Chan and Duque, 2002, Dines and Garovich, 2024. This is especially problematic for women who experience a large drop in estrogen following menopause. Bonnick, 2006. A condition characterized by extensive loss of bone mass and weakening of the bones, called osteoporosis, is therefore much more common in women than men. Among individuals over age 65 years, 27.1% of women have osteoporosis compared to 5.7% of men. Sarah Frazee et al., 2021. Research suggests that the best ways to prevent osteoporosis are to eat a healthy diet with plenty of calcium, vitamin D, and protein, to exercise regularly, figure 15.6, especially doing weight-bearing exercise, and to limit smoking and alcohol consumption, National Institute on Aging, 2022. While osteoporosis is a loss of bone mass, sarcopenia is a loss of muscle mass that also occurs later in life. Generally, adults can expect to lose around 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade after age 30 years. While this gradual decline is not very noticeable, it does accelerate after age 60 years. Volpe et al., 2004. Getting plenty of exercise, including aerobic exercise and resistance training, consuming adequate amounts of protein, and maintaining adequate caloric intake have all been associated with decreasing age-related muscle loss. Research has shown that weight training programs significantly increase strength and muscle power, even among individuals ages 90 years and older. Kador et al., 2014. Other studies have demonstrated similar benefits for yoga, which has the added benefit of increasing flexibility. Green et al., 2019. Jeter et al., 2014. Research such as this suggests that while muscle loss is normative in later years, it is also reversible, and even the oldest individuals can gain strength and muscle with intentional efforts. The loss of both muscle and bone mass can be a problematic combination. Weaker bones and muscles can hinder the ability to walk and increase the chance of falling. With less muscle protecting weaker bones, falls are more likely to result in fractures and other serious injuries. Colin et al., 2018. Additionally, weakened bones can actually break and cause a fall. Hamdi, 2017. An older adult may need to be inactive for many weeks while a broken bone heals, and inactivity can accelerate losses in both muscle and bone mass, making it more difficult to regain mobility after recovery. Weight training and yoga interventions have been found to improve balance and reduce the risk of falling, in addition to increasing muscle and bone mass and flexibility. Kador et al., 2014. Green et al., 2019. Jeter et al., 2014. Sensory changes. Decline in visual acuity, the extent to which we can see clearly at a distance, typically begins in middle adulthood when the lens in the eye stiffens. Sjöstrand et al., 2011. As a result, many individuals who never had vision problems eventually need corrective eyewear. It is also typical to struggle to see things at close range as we age. This condition, called presbyopia, requires many middle-aged and older adults to use reading glasses. Another eye condition that becomes common with age is the development of cataracts, cloudy areas on the typically clear lens of the eye, caused by a buildup of protein. Cataracts result in blurry, less clear vision and impaired color vision, but they can be successfully treated with outpatient surgery, figure 15.7. The condition, age-related macular degeneration, is characterized by blurring and potential loss of vision in the center of the field of vision as a result of damage to the macula, the central part of the retina. Peripheral vision is typically maintained. Much less common than cataracts, macular degeneration is more difficult to treat and is the leading cause of severe vision loss later in life. While there is no cure, some forms can be medically treated with injections. American Optometric Association, ND. Ashraf and Suka, 2017. Hernandez-Zimbron et al., 2018. Another condition common in later life, glaucoma, is typically associated with increased pressure inside the eye and resulting damage to the optic nerve, which can bring about permanent vision loss if not treated. Casson et al., 2012. This vision loss takes the form of tunnel vision, in which central vision is unaffected, but peripheral vision is damaged, figure 15.8. While some forms are genetic, most cases of glaucoma are difficult to predict and have been associated with environmental factors such as smoking. Generally, the risk increases considerably after age 60 years, although people with a family history of glaucoma or other risk factors can experience the disorder at much earlier ages, even in childhood. Doucette et al., 2015. Treatment typically consists of medicated eye drops and, if needed, surgery. Weinreb et al., 2014. Another vision-related condition common in advanced age is dry eye syndrome, which occurs when eyes don't produce enough tears. This is a primary aging change, but can also be affected by hormonal changes, medications, and high blood pressure. Dry eye syndrome affects 20% of people over the age of 80 years. Sharma and Heinemann, 2014. While it does not typically result in structural damage, it is still problematic because it has been associated with occasional blurry vision, pain, and sleep disturbances. Guo and Akpek, 2020. Hearing also undergoes normative declines associated with age, called presbycusis. Presbycusis is not an overall decrease in the volume at which we hear sound in the environment. Instead, the ability to hear high-pitched tones is affected first. Huang and Tang, 2010. Many factors, including genetics, may play a role in its severity, but one of the most common predictors of hearing loss in older age is repeated or extreme exposure to loud noise throughout life. Huang and Tang, 2010. This type of hearing loss can also occur at younger ages, when there is a lot of exposure to loud noise. A sample of 17-year-olds provided self-reported data about hearing issues, had objective hearing tests, and reported their music listening behaviors with earbuds. Those who listened for longer durations and at louder volumes had more self-reported hearing problems and scored lower on hearing tests, even at their young age. Wyden et al., 2017. More recent data indicate that approximately 1 billion people between the ages of 12 and 34 years are at risk of hearing loss caused by listening to music at unsafe levels, either through devices like earbuds or at loud venues like concerts or clubs, and that this hearing loss is not only permanent, but also accelerates late-life hearing loss. Dillard et al., 2022. Similar patterns are noted for people who spend a lot of time playing video games. Dillard et al., 2024. This research demonstrates not only that hearing loss can start much earlier in life, but also that damage accumulates over time. Life hacks. Assessing and protecting your hearing. As you read about the damage that listening to loud music can do to your hearing, did you find yourself thinking about your own listening habits as well as other noise exposure in your own life? If you have serious concerns about your hearing, you should be tested by a professional. Still, there are ways to get a general indication about whether you have experienced any age-related hearing loss, even at a young age. You can find online hearing tests that play high-pitched tones of different frequencies that represent what can typically be heard by those under 24, under 30, under 40, and under 50 years of age. If you find yourself unable to hear the pitches typically heard among your age group, it could be an indication that you have experienced more age-related hearing loss than is typical for your age. If you continue on this trajectory, you may experience more hearing loss and at a younger age than most. While this type of hearing loss is permanent, you can do things to minimize future loss, such as listening to music at lower volumes, wearing earplugs when attending loud concerts or clubs, and generally reducing your exposure to loud noise. You can also use technology to measure your exposure to loud noises. If you have an Apple Watch, you can download the Noise app, which measures the sound levels in your environment and notifies you if it's getting dangerously loud. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health Sound Level Meter app is similar and available for iPhones. Apps for Android products are also available. If you have an iPhone or Apple Watch and want to participate in research that helps further understanding of noise exposure and hearing, the University of Michigan Apple Hearing Study is an interesting option where you can also learn more about your own exposure to sound and how it may be affecting your health. Gender is also correlated with hearing loss in later life. On average, men have more hearing loss than women, a result believed to be partially related to hormonal differences and possibly even differences in the functioning of the cochlea, a snail-shaped fluid-filled chamber in the inner ear that transforms sound vibrations into electrical impulses sent to the brain for interpretation. Nolan 2020. But this tendency varies across cultures, suggesting that it is also influenced by lifestyle and work-related differences in exposure to loud noise. Men are more likely to work in noisy settings such as construction, and more likely to engage in behaviors such as smoking that are associated with increased hearing loss. Cornelius et al. 2022. Jung et al. 2024. Von Gablens et al. 2020. Older adults who have avoided loud noise throughout their lives may experience only subtle declines. Other age-related changes in the ear are not hearing-related. A condition called vertigo causes dizziness or the sensation of moving when still. Vertigo is experienced in 30% of those 60 years of age and older. Fernandez et al. 2015. It can have multiple causes, the most common being a buildup of calcium crystals in the ear canal. Treatments depend on the cause and severity and include medications and the Epley maneuver, a series of head movements intended to relocate the calcium deposits. Domaraju and Pereira 2016. Many issues unrelated to age, such as allergies, COVID-19, colds, and the flu, can result in short-term losses of smell and taste. Still, some age-related declines in these senses do occur, and while they're not dangerous, they can lead to problems like reduced enjoyment of food. Older adults who take less pleasure in food may eat less and can develop unintended weight loss and malnutrition. National Institute on Aging 2020. Research findings about changes in the sense of touch have been inconsistent, but sensitivity to pain, temperature, and vibration does tend to decline with age. Wickramaracci and Llewellyn, 2006. However, older adults are much more likely to report chronic or long-lasting pain as a serious problem that limits their functioning, quality of life, and social involvement. These reports are likely due to the increased prevalence of conditions, especially muscular and skeletal issues such as arthritis and sciatica, that contribute to joint, neck, and back discomfort. Dominichiello and Ramsden, 2019. Skin and hair changes. Other physical changes include the aging of the skin, which becomes thinner and drier and loses elasticity and fat, making wrinkles more common. Injuries such as bruises and cuts can appear more pronounced and take longer to heal as we get older. Age spots and even skin cancer can also become more common. Some changes are inevitable. Yet there is a great deal of diversity in the extent to which people experience age-related changes in the skin, some of which is strongly linked to environmental exposure throughout the lifespan. Skin dryness can be prevented by staying hydrated, applying moisturizers, and avoiding very dry climates. But the most influential factor in keeping your skin looking healthy and avoiding problems such as wrinkles, skin cancer, and age spots is to limit sun exposure throughout your life. Figure 15.9. This means consistently using sunscreen, wearing ultraviolet protective clothing, and avoiding suntanning and sunburns. National Institute on Aging 2017. As you may guess, the two most prominent age-related changes to hair are thinning and graying. Graying is due to a loss of melanin production in the hair follicle. Both genetic factors and racial differences play a part. For example, the onset of graying typically ranges from the mid-30s for white individuals to the mid-40s for black individuals. Some environmental factors, such as sun exposure, contribute as well. Maimon et al. 2021. Hair loss is also thought to be strongly genetic. While both men and women can experience thinning hair with age, it is more common and severe among men, with 60% of men over age 30 years reporting hair loss. Men whose fathers and maternal grandfathers experienced hair loss are at the greatest risk. Regardless of family history, the risk of hair loss increases with age. Chemlaya et al., 2004. Heart, lung, and bladder changes. Less visually obvious are physical changes to the cardiovascular system, including stiffening and hardening of the arteries, which results in increasing rates of hypertension, high blood pressure. Plaque buildup inside the artery walls, often the product of a high cholesterol diet, also increases with age and can limit blood flow. Problems such as these can damage and weaken the heart, potentially leading to heart failure. National Institute on Aging, 2018. In the United States, heart disease is the most common cause of death for people over age 45 years, and the percentage of deaths from heart disease increases with age. Crew et al., 2021. Men and women sometimes have different symptoms of heart disease. For example, women having a heart attack are more likely than men to have symptoms such as nausea and jaw pain, without any chest pain. Lichtman et al., 2018. Meaning that they often wait longer to get treatment and are likely to experience more heart damage as a result. Monitoring blood pressure and cholesterol, eating a healthy diet, and engaging in cardiovascular exercise are all important factors in maintaining a healthy cardiovascular system. The efficiency of the respiratory system tends to peak around our mid-20s and then slowly declines. Sharma and Goodwin, 2006. Not noticeable for much of adulthood, these declines become more consequential in later life. For example, bone loss can make the ribs less elastic and less capable of expanding and contracting as we breathe. Combined with other changes in the lungs, this loss decreases lung capacity as we age. American Lung Association, 2023. Coughs also become weaker, limiting the ability to clear unwanted particles from the lungs. Lowry et al., 2013. The lungs are also more susceptible to infections such as the flu, COVID-19, and pneumonia, which can develop into more serious conditions in older adults due to the declining functioning of the immune system. American Lung Association, 2023. Another physical change relates to the bladder and bladder control. Urinary incontinence can occur at any age but becomes increasingly common in later life. It is a product of urinary muscles not working appropriately due to a variety of reasons, such as weakening muscles, overactive bladder muscles, damage associated with chronic health problems, and the shifting of organs around the bladder. Incontinence can be more common among men, who may also experience inflammation or enlargement of the prostate. Medical treatment and behavioral options such as pelvic muscle/Kegel exercises are available, depending on the cause of the incontinence. National Institute on Aging, 2022. Sleep changes. The amount of sleep recommended and the average amount of sleep attained both decrease across the lifespan. Older adults should get about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Chaput et al., 2018. Since circadian rhythms shift forward as we age, most people find themselves going to bed earlier and waking up earlier than when they were younger. Newsom and DeBanto, 2023. Chronic pain, dementia, and other health problems can bring sleeping challenges for older adults. Around half of older adults report frequent sleep problems, such as difficulty falling asleep and increased sleep disturbances after falling asleep. These problems have been positively correlated with mortality, increased risk of falls and other accidents, and declines in cognitive functioning. Crowley, 2011. Sivertson et al., 2021. Changes in the brain. The brain undergoes several normative changes as we age. After the age of 40 years, its volume decreases by 5% every 10 years. A decline that may speed up after age 70 years, and that seems more pronounced in men than women. While this decreasing volume likely has many contributing factors, it may be due to shrinking neurons, fewer synapses, and decreases in the volume of blood in the brain than to actual cell death. Peters, 2006. Selle et al., 2021. The brain's cortex, responsible for cognitive processes such as memory, problem-solving, and decision-making, is also growing thinner. Recent research suggests the process begins around the age of 4 years. Fiel et al., 2015. So thinning later in life continues a trend that has lasted most of the lifespan. This thinning trend may sound like a negative change, but much of it is associated with lifelong synaptic pruning, in which the brain gets rid of synapses and neurons that are no longer needed, thereby increasing its efficiency in processing information. Still, some research suggests that an accelerated thinning of the cortex can be associated with decreased cognitive ability. Fiel et al., 2015. Shaw et al., 2016. Another factor contributing to decreasing brain volume is the loss of white matter. White matter is the inner portion of the brain which consists of millions of axons, each covered with a fatty myelin sheath, giving a white appearance. While white matter was historically thought to be unimportant in brain function, it is now believed to allow different regions of the brain to communicate and may also play a role in learning. Fields, 2008. While the myelin on neurons continues to develop until the mid-20s, it then becomes relatively stable before starting to deteriorate after the age of 40 years. Peters, 2006. The loss of myelin may have more implications than reducing brain volume. The primary purpose of myelin on nerve cells is to insulate the axon, resulting in increases in speed and efficiency of the neuron. Research has found that the slowing of the brain in later life, seen in lower processing speed, for instance, can be accounted for by age-related declines in white matter. Kirchner et al., 2012. Another change in the brain occurs in the hippocampi, the regions of the brain within each of the two temporal lobes that assist in the formation and retention of new memories. Structural changes occur that are associated with age-related memory declines. Yasa et al., 2011. The brain also has mechanisms to preserve and assist its functioning despite these age-related changes. Neuroplasticity, or the brain's ability to change in response to challenges or new experiences, typically decreases with age. Calabrese et al., 2013. Sorrells et al., 2018. And for a long time, it was thought that individuals developed only new synaptic connections, not new neurons, after birth. However, some research suggests the brain in later life is able to create new neurons, including in areas important for memory, like the hippocampus. Moreno-Jimenez et al., 2019. Some research examining neuroplasticity in older mice revealed that physical activity and exposure to an enriched environment resulted in the creation of new hippocampal neurons. Kemperman et al., 2002. Liu and Nuslock, 2018. Although these findings are specific to non-human animal research, they are consistent with research suggesting that older adults who live an active lifestyle with cognitive stimulation experience less cognitive decline and, in some cases, restoration of function following neurological impairment. Hahn et al., 2022. Stillman et al., 2020. Other research has revealed increased functioning of the frontal lobes in some older adults. The frontal lobes are responsible for many of our higher-level cognitive processes, such as decision-making and planning. Older adults who have increased activity in the frontal cortex tend to perform better on cognitive tasks. This increase in frontal lobe activity could thus be an example of neuroplasticity compensating for other declines in brain function. Go and Park, 2009. Growing up, Jarvis listened to his older relatives complain about their aches and pains and thought, "I'll never do that." Now, as he enters his 70s, he realizes how wrong he was. Although his overall health is pretty good, years of serving in the military and working in construction have resulted in some hearing loss, as well as arthritis in his hands, wrists, and knees. These problems don't significantly impair his functioning, but Jarvis takes more aspirin than he used to and has started to wear a hearing aid. Following a cancer scare, he gave up smoking and discovered that he was breathing better and had more stamina than he expected to have at his age. Jarvis worries less than he did when he was younger, although the cost of healthcare gives him some anxiety. He resolves to do his best to stay healthy so he can keep enjoying life. This section describes different types of physical and mental health risks and how they relate to older adults. Policy issues related to healthcare affordability and accessibility can also play a role in health risks in late adulthood. Physical health concerns in late adulthood. In health research, good health is typically defined by omission. In other words, researchers typically view good health as the lack of any short or long-term diseases or conditions that can have a negative effect on quality of life, functioning, or future. Acute and chronic health problems. An acute condition tends to occur quickly and last only a brief period. Examples include many short-term, common, and contagious conditions, such as the common cold and flu. Acute conditions are not associated with age. On the other hand, a chronic condition often develops slowly over time and is positively correlated with age. The defining characteristic of a chronic condition is that it has a long duration, several months or longer, or even occurs on a constant basis, and needs management to prevent worsening over time. National Council on Aging, 2020. Examples include osteoarthritis, heart disease, asthma, and diabetes. Poor lifestyle choices such as unhealthy diet, a sedentary lifestyle, and smoking increase the risk of developing some of these health conditions. As we get older, the odds of facing chronic health conditions increase. Around 70% of U.S. adults aged 55 to 64 years manage at least one chronic health condition, and 14% have three or more. By age 65 years, those numbers have risen to 86 and 23%, respectively. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 2015. Due to the increasing population of older adults, however, the number of individuals with at least one chronic health problem is expected to double between 2020 and 2050, ANSA and Chu, 2023. This is particularly worrisome because of the high cost of medical care for chronic conditions. In the United States, 85% of healthcare costs are spent on chronic conditions. Holman et al., 2020. In 2011, this cost was predicted to reach $47 trillion by 2030. Hacker, 2024. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of people needing care for chronic conditions has increased, and this figure is now predicted to be even higher. Cutler, 2022. Tenning et al., 2023. Tufts et al., 2023. Acute conditions, however, become less common with age. Preschool children, on average, experience 6 to 8 colds per year, sometimes one per month, because of their limited immunity to different viruses. As we get older, the lifelong process of contracting these acute conditions builds immunity to specific infections, decreasing the odds of future acute illness. Pappas, 2022. This is not to say that acute conditions are not a problem for older adults. As mentioned earlier, many acute conditions such as the flu, pneumonia, RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and COVID-19 can be more serious and potentially fatal for older adults because the immune system's ability to respond to infections weakens with age. This is a main reason older adults have been more likely to experience serious illness from COVID-19 and why they are highly encouraged to get regularly vaccinated. Sexual functioning in older age. Sexual activity remains a common element of relationships in later life. While sexual activity may be less frequent, a large percentage of older adults still enjoy sex. Jackson et al., 2020. Lee et al., 2016. Ricoi Kano et al., 2020. Several studies have indicated that 50 to 80% of adults aged 60 to 74 years and 15 to 30% of adults over age 80 years report being sexually active, with men reporting more sexual activity than women. Jackson et al., 2020. Lee et al., 2016. Physical health may affect sexual functioning more in older adults than in other age groups. For example, estrogen and testosterone levels decline after middle age. Brado et al., 2016. Hochberg and Kohner, 2020. Hull et al., 2011. Ricoi Kano et al., 2020, which can affect both sex drive and performance, including vaginal lubrication and the ability to achieve an erection. Joint pain and loss of flexibility, both of which increase in later life, may make certain sexual positions uncomfortable. Health problems such as high blood pressure and diabetes, also more likely in later life, are reliably associated with lower rates of sexual activity and desire. Brado et al., 2016. Jackson et al., 2020. Lee et al., 2016. Some research proposes that loss of sex drive or performance may be an early indicator of health problems. Jackson et al., 2020. Suggesting that healthcare providers should ask older patients about their sexual health as a routine part of medical checkups. Another issue is prevention of sexually transmitted infections, STIs. Over the past decade or so, rates of STIs have increased in many countries, and older adults aren't exempt. Bourchier et al., 2020. Morgan et al., 2023. Smith et al., 2020. However, older adults are generally unlikely to use prevention methods such as condoms or PrEP, Morgan et al., 2023, and they demonstrate low knowledge of STI transmission, symptoms, and prevention, Smith et al., 2020. Therefore, healthcare providers should screen for STIs and discuss safe sex methods with their older patients. Specific threats to health in older age. Researchers examining data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Su et al., 2022, found that 7 of the 10 leading causes of death for older adults were chronic health conditions that typically become more common in later years. Figure 15.10. The leading cause of death in the United States for 2020 and 2021 was heart disease, an example of a chronic condition associated with many lifestyle factors such as diet, exercise, and stress. The second leading cause of death was cancer, followed by COVID-19, injuries, stroke, respiratory disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, liver disease/cirrhosis, and kidney disease. The more common age-related causes of death, such as heart disease, some types of cancer, respiratory disease, and diabetes are all at least partly caused by environmental and lifestyle characteristics. National Center for Health Statistics, 2021. Many common causes of death are consistent across racial and ethnic groups, with subtle variations in their frequency. This is true for all the age-related causes of death as well, with heart disease and cancer leading across all racial and ethnic groups in the United States. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 2022. These variations are generally believed to be caused by environmental factors, particularly the chronic stress associated with poverty and institutionalized racism. Cunningham et al. 2017, Leitner et al. 2016. This chronic stress may accelerate the development of health problems. Ford, 2019. Simons, Lay, Klopak, Beach et al. 2021. Simons, Lay, Kopak, Zhang et al. 2021. And racism both within and outside of the healthcare system can prevent people from receiving appropriate medical care. Leitner et al. 2016, Sim et al. 2021. Simons, Lay, Klopak, Beach et al. 2021. Simons, Lay, Kopak, Zhang et al. 2021. The end result is that medical problems may go untreated, thus leading to decreased life expectancy. One study compared 11 of the highest income countries: United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Sweden, France, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Denmark, Canada, Japan, and Australia, to better understand similarities and differences in health and health outcomes around the world. The United States appeared healthier than most countries on some high-risk factors, such as smoking, and it ranked near the middle on alcohol consumption. On weight, however, the United States ranked worst, with 70.1% of the population overweight or obese. Australia was next at 63.4%. And Japan had the fewest problems related to weight, with 23.8% of the population considered overweight or obese. Overall, the United States had the shortest average life expectancy at 78.8 years, and Japan the highest at 83.9 years. Papanikola's et al. 2018, Figure 15.11. Health problems and outcomes in developing and low-income countries are vastly different because they are often those associated with living in poverty. For example, data from the World Health Organization suggests that neonatal conditions, diarrhea, malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV are all top 10 causes of death in countries within the bottom 25% when ranked on income. World Health Organization 2020. An interesting variation on international differences in health and life expectancy comes from the study of blue zones, the areas of the world with an unusually high number of people older than their predicted life expectancy, in many cases 100 years of age or more. Buettner, 2008, Buettner, and Skemp, 2016. Herbert et al., 2022. Creuzzi et al., 2022. Poulin and Herm, 2022. These places are Nicoya Peninsula, Costa Rica, Icaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, and Loma Linda, California in the United States. Their residents have longevity and good health in common, but they differ ethnically, economically, and geographically. What commonalities, then, are producing these good health outcomes? Research has found several shared characteristics that appear to positively affect their health. Moving naturally. Blue Zone residents don't get formal exercise but are physically active in their daily lives. Gardening, doing housework, walking to get places. Having a sense of purpose. They are motivated and goal-oriented. Managing stress. They have regular rituals, such as prayer and ancestor worship, that help them cope with stress. Monitoring their food portions and meal times. They eat until they're only 80% full, and also eat their largest meal at midday instead of in the evening. Following a plant-based diet, most of their protein comes from beans and lentils. They may eat meat, but not frequently. Drinking in moderation. Having 1 to 2 glasses of wine per day is associated with longer life in these groups. However, there's controversy about the role of alcohol consumption in health. Participating in a faith-based community. Most residents attend some kind of religious services several times a month. Putting family first. Residents prioritize living with or near extended family and spending time with children and life partners. Surrounding themselves with support. They create networks of close friends who support their healthy behaviors and provide companionship. Buettner and Skemp, 2016. Herbert et al., 2022. Creuzzi et al., 2022. Poulin and Herm, 2022. While it's hard to say conclusively that these behaviors are causing the increased life expectancy, they're consistent with other research associating them with positive health outcomes. Cruzzi et al., 2022. Many such behaviors, such as creating networks of close friends, consuming mainly plant-based protein, and being naturally active, can be achieved without spending a lot of money. This suggests that people in low-income situations may be able to incorporate some of these behaviors into their lives and increase their chances of living longer and healthier lives. However, other facets of SES may also limit awareness of best health practices. For example, some studies find that lower educational level and lower income are associated with less knowledge about how to promote good health. Svensson et al., 2020. Research studies recommend public health strategies work to improve health equity by promoting better knowledge of health risk and health promotion behaviors across populations. Sorensen et al., 2015. Mental health concerns in late adulthood. While some mental health problems are specific to later life, such as different types of dementia, other challenges such as anxiety and depression are less common for older adults than for younger age groups. A subfield of psychology called geropsychology focuses on enhancing the mental health of older adults. American Psychological Association, 2024. Geropsychologists are specially trained to address the way mental health problems may manifest themselves in late life. Depression. Unfortunately, due to systemic ageism, people often negatively stereotype older adults as living lonely lives and struggling with depression as they face. However, according to research, these stereotypes are far from accurate. In fact, depression rates tend to decrease with age, and young adults are more than 4 times more likely to have depression than adults aged 50 years and older, figure 15.12. Research in countries throughout Europe also suggests that older adults tend to defy stereotypes that they are a depressed group. Beller et al., 2021. Copeland et al., 1999. As it turns out, not only does the risk of depression decrease, but the experience of positive emotions increases. Cartensen and DeLima, 2018. These findings don't suggest that depression is irrelevant to older populations. Nearly 1 in 20 older adults deal with major depression within a given year, and many more face less severe depressive symptoms. Research suggests that economic hardship, loneliness, serious chronic health problems, caregiving for a loved one, the loss of a loved one, and cognitive impairment all place older adults experiencing those events at a higher risk for depression than their peers. Alexopoulos, 2005. Isik et al., 2020. Adequate social support, exercise, and confidence in physical ability tend to reduce the risk of depression. Miller et al., 2019. As does setting and achieving realistic and personally meaningful goals. Samantare and Carr, 2021. Being able to adapt to new circumstances is also beneficial. For example, looking at a move to a retirement community as a relief from the responsibilities of home ownership instead of a loss of independence may prevent someone from being distressed about this change. Regier and Parmalee, 2021. Research shows that older adults are at a higher risk for suicide. Overall, men are much more likely to die by suicide, a finding consistent across race, ethnicity, and age. White people tend to have higher suicide rates than other racial and ethnic groups. Those in the earlier part of older adulthood, ages 65 to 74 years, have the lowest rate of suicide across adulthood, with around 15 suicides per 100,000 individuals. The rate increases to 19 suicides per 100,000 people for those aged 75 to 84 years, and more than 22 per 100,000 people for adults aged 85 years and older. American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, 2024. Having depression, being unmarried, and living alone makes suicide more common in older age. Wictorson et al., 2010. Loss of a spouse has also been linked to suicide ideation in this population. Heiser and Howe, 2019. Anxiety. Like depression, anxiety is more common in women than men. 23% of women reported experiencing an anxiety disorder in the past year, compared to 14% of men. National Institute of Mental Health, ND. Lifetime prevalence of anxiety disorders is around 34%, but research generally suggests they typically first appear from childhood to early adulthood. They tend to peak in the early part of middle adulthood, before decreasing during the later part of middle adulthood and throughout older age. Bandelow and Michaelis, 2022. Javade et al., 2023. Figure 15.13. While anxiety is less common in later life, nearly 1 in 10 older adults reported experiencing an anxiety disorder within the past year. Older adults with anxiety disorders frequently have comorbid disorders such as depression, serious medical issues, and cognitive decline. Late-onset anxiety is not common. Most older adults dealing with anxiety also experienced it at younger ages. Anxiety in older adults can be successfully treated with either medication or cognitive behavioral therapy. Ando et al., 2023. Wolitsky-Taylor et al., 2010. Healthcare costs in older age. Paying for healthcare to treat the potential problems of later life can be both complicated and expensive in the United States. Despite having the lowest average life expectancy among high-income nations, the United States spent the highest percentage of gross domestic product, 17.8%, and the highest amount per individual, including for individual healthcare, in addition to tax contributions toward public healthcare programs. Figure 15.14. Papanikolaou et al., 2018. These statistics are concerning. They suggest that people in the United States are paying much more than those in comparable countries for healthcare, yet they are last in life expectancy among the nations studied. One reason for the higher cost of healthcare in the United States may be the nation's complex healthcare system. Most other affluent countries have universal healthcare, a system that makes healthcare services accessible to all citizens with little or no out-of-pocket costs for individuals, because the government subsidizes the cost through taxes. In the United States, in contrast, healthcare can be paid for entirely out of pocket or through privately purchased health insurance, employer-provided health insurance, or a variety of federal and state programs. This complex system can be difficult to navigate, especially for older adults who may have limited income and greater healthcare needs. Few of these options cover all costs or all types of healthcare, and individuals typically pay at least some expenses themselves, either directly or through the purchase of supplemental insurance. Thus, socioeconomic status is a factor in access to high-quality healthcare. Medicare is a U.S. federal program that pays some healthcare costs for many older adults, particularly related to hospital care and doctor visits. Because many expenses, such as vision care and dental care, are not covered, however, most older adults also purchase supplemental health insurance or a Medicare Advantage plan, Medicare ND, if they don't already have other insurance. Medicare does not automatically offer prescription drug coverage, a significant expense for older adults. This has to be added separately or covered through another form of insurance. Individuals who are unable to pay for health coverage may qualify for Medicaid, a program like Medicare, but for those with limited income, Medicaid ND. While older adults face several health risks, such as those related to normative age-related changes and increased healthcare costs, there are many protective factors that can promote mental and physical health and well-being in older adulthood. For example, older adults often experience healthy sexual functioning and lower risks of depression and anxiety than in earlier adulthood. Finally, several health-promoting behaviors or protective factors can be introduced to improve health and life expectancy in older adults, such as engaging in physical activity, eating well, having a good social support system, and managing stress. Ahmad's career as a high school history teacher required constant mental activity and use of cognitive skills such as memory, attention, and problem solving. When he was starting out, Ahmad relied on older, more experienced teachers for advice, but as the years progressed, he became the one younger colleagues came to for guidance, which was a gratifying feeling. After retiring, Ahmad continued to engage in cognitively stimulating activities, like reading and doing puzzles, and he began volunteering with an organization that crafted blankets and hats for babies in NICUs. Ahmed enjoyed learning how to knit and crochet, even though some things took a little longer to grasp than they might have 30 years ago. Theories about cognitive development debate whether people have a single or multiple intelligences. Most research on older adults does not focus on a single intelligence score, however, because abilities tend to change at different times and in different directions. For some cognitive tasks, such as crystallized intelligence and vocabulary, improvements occur across adulthood. For others, such as fluid intelligence and processing speed, performance typically peaks earlier in adulthood and then declines. Verissimo et al., 2022. This section covers various cognitive abilities in later life, including processing speed, wisdom, and different types of memory, as well as the broader context of these cognitive skills for solving problems in everyday life. Cognitive abilities in late adulthood. Ageist stereotypes can lead many to assume that moments of forgetfulness in older adults are an indicate of cognitive decline. However, in reality, all of us have moments of forgetfulness or confusions. What does the research on memory and cognition in late adulthood reveal? In fact, cognitive aging is much more nuanced than the stereotypes suggest. Processing speed. Processing speed, one of the most basic cognitive skills we can study, measures the length of time it takes for us to perceive sensory information and follow with a response. One way to measure this response time experimentally is to have participants press a button on a keyboard as soon as a shape or object appears on a screen. The number of milliseconds their response requires indicates each individual's reaction time. Processing speed is associated with overall cognitive ability, and people with quick processing speed tend to perform well on other cognitive tasks like memory and attention. Papadopoulos et al., 2018. Ticha et al., 2023. Research consistently finds that processing speed slows across all of adulthood. Davis et al., 2017. Marrero-Polegre et al., 2023. Ticha et al., 2023. However, this decline doesn't manifest the same way for everyone. For example, education received in young adulthood is positively correlated with performance on cognitive tasks in late adulthood, although it doesn't appear to prevent decline. Instead, it seems to produce a higher baseline level of functioning that means cognitive skills are better maintained with age. Davis et al., 2017. Vonk et al., 2020. Similarly, speed on cognitive tasks in young adulthood and middle age is often predictive of performance in later life. Members of the fastest 10th percentile, despite consistent declines, may still be faster in their 70s than many of the slower groups were in their 20s. Introsi et al., 2020, Salthouse, 2000. More complex processing speed tasks, like driving, require more complex responses and reveal age-related declines. Figure 15.15. If a car pulls out in front of you, or the driver ahead of you slams their brakes, you may have to react quickly to avoid an accident. A response heavily based on processing speed, but more complex than simple reaction time, because of the number of possible reactions. You could honk your horn, swerve to the right, swerve to the left, brake hard, accelerate, or choose a combination of responses. Research suggests that older adults' processing speed is predictive of driving mistakes during simulations, but that older adults tend to compensate for slower processing speeds by driving more slowly, which affords them time to respond to hazards. Thus, it's difficult to discern how much increased risk of driving accidents among older adults is due to slowed processing speed and how much may be due to other relevant issues such as visual declines. Doro-Gar et al., 2017. Fluid and crystallized intelligence. Many developmental paths you've learned about continue throughout later adulthood. For example, fluid intelligence declines with age, while crystallized abilities increase, with both trends continuing in those aged 60 years and older. Recall from 7.3 Intelligence in Middle Childhood that fluid intelligence is the ability to use logic and solve problems in new ways, and crystallized intelligence is our existing knowledge developed through education and experience. Initial theories indicated that relying on crystallized abilities could be a way to compensate for declining fluid abilities. More recent research, however, suggests this may not be the case. Tucker-Drob and colleagues, 2022, found in 2 large longitudinal studies that individuals who declined the least in fluid abilities also increased the most in crystallized abilities across adulthood. Similarly, individuals experiencing the greatest declines in fluid abilities had less increase and sometimes even a decline in crystallized abilities. This suggests that crystallized abilities do not strengthen to compensate for declines in fluid abilities. Instead, there are more individual differences in the way cognitive ability changes throughout adulthood. Memory and older age. Short-term memory has very limited capacity and retains information for a very brief period. Research suggests that it declines over time, noticeably at ages 60 through 69 years and in more pronounced ways after age 70 years. Working memory requires more effort to use as we manipulate and apply information in short-term memory. These demands result in a more noticeable drop in working memory, especially over age 70 years, although some studies have noted little to no change between middle age and the start of late adulthood. Sharma and Babu, 2017. Short-term memory, with which we can say immediately recall numbers that were presented, is more passive and demonstrates more subtle declines. Dobbs and Rule, 1989. Pliatsikas et al., 2018. Working and short-term memories typically last less than 30 seconds. When it comes to long-term memories, research has distinguished many types. One of these, implicit memory, is not conscious. That is, previous experiences allow us to complete a task without even realizing how. Think of learning to ride a bicycle. Figure 15.16. People often describe it as difficult and very intentional at first. Once they master the skill, though, they are able to ride a bicycle automatically, without remembering what to do each time. And if you learn to ride a bike, you likely still can, even if it has been a long time. May et al. 2005. In contrast, explicit memories are long-term memories, of which we are quite aware. One type is semantic memory, which stores facts, vocabulary, and other information about the world. Semantic memory tends to remain intact and does not decline with age. Lala et al. 2022. It overlaps considerably with crystallized intelligence, but retrieval problems grow more common with age. Crook and West, 1990. Srkova et al. 2022. For instance, the tip of the tongue phenomenon, a temporary failure to recall a stored memory, increases in later years. But the basic functioning of semantic memory seems to remain fairly stable. Another type of long-term memory is episodic memory, which stores details and information from life events. Research suggests that declines in episodic memory are among the more common age-related memory declines. Kinegawa et al. 2013. Most of this research, however, uses cross-sectional age comparisons. Longitudinal data confirm declines in episodic memory, but suggest they may be more subtle and gradual than cross-sectional research indicates. Dixon et al. 2004. These declines have been associated with decreased functioning of the hippocampus. Hippocampus functioning and episodic memory demonstrate accelerated declines after age 65 years. Nyberg, 2016. An entire category of memory, autobiographical memory, is dedicated to remembering information about ourselves and our personal life and history. Episodic memories, which seem similar, are indeed part of our autobiographical memory, but autobiographical memory includes many semantic memories as well. For example, you may remember the experience of your first day of high school, how you felt, what the classrooms looked like, and so on. This is episodic memory, which is often represented through images and feelings. Autobiographical memory, on the other hand, includes that episodic information plus semantic, factual information, such as the names of your teachers and whether it rained that day. We know a lot of factual information, semantic memories, about ourselves that is not linked to specific events of our life. Our name, birth date, the name of the high school we attended, are all examples of autobiographical memories that are relevant to semantic memories and not typically linked to a specific episode or life event. Frankenberg et al., 2021, Roediger and Marsh, 2003. Research examining changes in autobiographical memory in later years parallels research related to episodic and semantic memory. There are declines in episodic aspects of autobiographical memory, but not in the semantic aspect. Jacques and Levine, 2007. One unique finding related to autobiographical memory is the positivity effect, the tendency to remember things from our past more positively as we get older. Kennedy et al., 2004. Some research suggests this may be due to increases in emotional regulation ability, combined with shifting priorities for maintaining a positive emotional state. Cognitive aging in context. Cognitive skills are interesting as a topic, but what's even more useful is the way people use these skills to accomplish real-life tasks. One area associated with more positive aging stereotypes is wisdom. Defining wisdom is a difficult task. Wide-ranging descriptions appear across both history and the academic literature, but in general, wisdom is the ability to use intellect and past experiences to make good decisions about the future. Wisdom requires considering the perspectives of others, compromising, and understanding uncertain or changing contexts. Grossman, 2017. Wisdom is similar to post-formal thought, but it is more reliant on using life experiences. The scientific literature on wisdom suggests the potential for wisdom to increase over time, though age alone is not a good indicator of wisdom. Age is, however, positively correlated with wisdom, since more experience can be beneficial for acquiring the life lessons needed for wisdom, and more experience can be had with age. The true defining characteristics of wisdom, however, are being open to experiences, learning from them, and being willing to change and adapt in the future based on these experiential lessons. Sternberg, 2005. People who take this approach to life are more likely to see their wisdom increase as they get older and subsequently gain more experiences and life lessons. Research on everyday problem solving looks at the way people solve cognitively demanding tasks and make decisions in the real world, including in social settings. Herzog et al., 2021. Marcisk and Margaret, 2006. Strauss et al., 2003. Many cognitive tasks, typically used to study reasoning or problem-solving skills, rely on abstract situations, unlike day-to-day life, a research approach that has been criticized for lacking validity. Artistico et al., 2019. Chater et al., 2003. Hamilton et al., 2022. Jones et al., 2021. If instead we measure skills used in activities of daily living, ADL, like figuring out a bus schedule or making financial decisions, participants can better demonstrate their abilities without being disadvantaged by the unfamiliar context of traditional cognitive tests. Artistico and colleagues, 2019, found that asking older adults to solve problems they perceived as personally relevant resulted in more and better solutions than asking them to solve problems experienced by other people. Are older adults more effective at solving everyday problems than young adults? Early research findings yield mixed results. Some studies suggested they are, Blanchard Fields et al., 2007, whereas other studies found these skills increased until middle adulthood before declining, Denny and Pierce, 1989, and some suggested a plateau lasting through most of early and middle adulthood before a decline in later years, Thornton and Dumke, 2005. More recent research has suggested several reasons for these inconsistent findings. First, everyday problem-solving and decision-making likely tap into different underlying abilities, such as crystallized and fluid abilities, that change differently with age. Older adults tend to rely more on crystallized abilities than young and middle-aged adults do. Artistico et al., 2019, Chen et al., 2017, so performance may differ based on which abilities are required by the task in question. Also, this research has focused mostly on cross-sectional data, so what is interpreted as age differences could instead represent cohort differences, or a combination of both. For example, the primary stressors of young and middle-aged adults tend to relate to school and work, while for older adults they are health concerns. Because health concerns are longer-term and harder to avoid and control than school and work concerns, they may require a different problem-solving approach that includes regulating emotional reactions instead of fixing the situation. Chen et al., 2018. If research uses solution-focused strategies as the determinant of success regardless of the task at hand, it may overlook other adaptive measures participants use to solve problems. One potential contributor to everyday problem-solving is expertise, a very high level of knowledge or skill related to a specific area. Figure 15.17. Developing expertise often requires having a lot of experience with something. This is associated with age for obvious reasons. But as with wisdom, age alone doesn't make someone an expert. Experience appears to be more important. For example, one study examining financial decision-making found that expertise, defined here as deep experience with financial decision-making and a high level of knowledge of finance issues, was beneficial. Again, like wisdom, expertise may thus provide a path to making sound decisions that is not as affected by declines in fluid abilities, such as processing speed and reasoning, Lee et al., 2015. All the cognitive declines you've learned about are normative age-related results that most people tend to experience. They are usually small in scale, with very limited impact on everyday functioning, Harada et al., 2013. If cognitive declines are severe enough to interfere with someone's day-to-day life and threaten their independence, another problem such as dementia is likely the cause. While some small cognitive declines are normative with age in certain areas of memory, those with expertise can show improvements in everyday problem-solving as they age. Much like other stages of the lifespan, there are many individual differences in cognitive abilities based on people's, environments, resources, and contexts. Many older adults can cognitively adapt well to changes as they age through good adaptive cognition and a supportive environment. Blanchard, Fields, and Chen, 1996. Lillian had been a bit absent-minded all her life, so her family and friends didn't initially pay much attention to her memory lapses as she got older. However, it became obvious over time that Lillian's cognitive functioning was changing. She'd always had trouble remembering the names of her 8 grandchildren, but now she didn't always recognize them, thinking they were neighborhood children. She had trouble making grocery lists and keeping track of what she already had, so she often had spoiled food in her refrigerator as a result. After Lillian missed several bill payments and fell victim to a phone scam, her daughter-in-law took control of her finances, and the family worried about whether she could continue to live in her home. So far, you've observed that many normative cognitive declines occur in later life, but don't typically interfere with older adults' ability to function independently. In this section, you will study non-normative cognitive changes, specifically types of dementia. Note that some people do not fit neatly into the category of either dementia or normative cognitive decline. The cognitive decline that is more severe than normative, but below the threshold for a dementia-related diagnosis, is called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. While many individuals experiencing MCI don't progress to more severe cognitive decline, having MCI does place an individual at increased risk of later developing dementia, Etkin et al. 2011. Dementia, an umbrella term for a wide variety of conditions characterized by damage to the brain, including cell death, is dementia. This neurological damage can interfere with older adults' daily functioning and ability to live independently. The specific symptoms vary across individuals and dementia types. National Institute on Aging, 2022. As noted in Table 15.2, the likelihood of experiencing dementia increases as we get older, Manley et al. 2022, Nianogo et al. 2021. Incidence rates vary somewhat across racial and ethnic groups, with Hispanic and non-Hispanic Black older adults showing higher rates of dementia than white older adults. Recent estimates suggest that the percentages of people with dementia in these groups are roughly 14, 19, and 10% respectively. Alzheimer's Association 2024. Also, as you'll learn later, the risk factors for developing dementia may differ across these groups, and women are more likely to experience dementia than men. The reasons are unclear, but is largely believed to be due to women having a longer life expectancy than men. Other factors, such as lower rates of smoking and cardiovascular disease, may also contribute. Alzheimer's Association 2024, Beam et al. 2018, Nianogo et al. 2022, Sheltons et al. 2021, Tahami Monferd et al. 2022. Table 15.2 shows the percentage of individuals who have dementia, divided by age and sex. Numbers may not add to 100 due to rounding. Because dementia often develops slowly, identification and diagnoses may not be immediate. Symptoms may come on gradually and go unnoticed for several years. It may be difficult initially to tell the difference between normal age-related cognitive changes and those that indicate dementia. Also, in the earliest stages of dementia, older adults may be able to compensate for cognitive changes or perform well in front of family and loved ones for short periods of time. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. Tahami Monferd et al., 2022. If an older adult approaches healthcare providers with worries about cognitive declines, or a concerned family member does so on their behalf, the older individual will likely receive a dementia screening assessment, testing vocabulary, spatial skills, memory, and language. One such screening is the Mini Mental State Exam, Fulstein et al., 1975, a short assessment with 30 scored components related to a variety of cognitive tasks. A score below 24 indicates that someone may be experiencing a cognitive impairment such as dementia, Fulstein et al., 1975, Kurlowitz and Wallace, 1999. Dementia is often identified by symptoms such as cognitive performance, but additional information is needed before a diagnosis. For example, it is valuable to know whether a person has a history of alcohol overuse or head injuries, the cognitive decline is sudden or abrupt, or the person has a family history of dementia, because this could help establish what type of dementia the person has. Other issues can complicate the diagnosis. Figure 15.18. For example, depression, Lyme disease, sleep problems, infections, and certain vitamin deficiencies can cause short-term cognitive symptoms similar to dementia, as can side effects and interactions of multiple medications taken simultaneously. This last is particularly likely to be a problem for older adults, who tend to take more medications than other age groups. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. In the long term, research suggests that taking many medications simultaneously over time also increases the likelihood of developing dementia. Park et al., 2017. Several types of dementia exist. They differ somewhat in their cause and symptoms, but all are characterized by cognitive impairment that worsens over time and represents more than the typical age-related cognitive changes discussed in 15.2 Health Risks in Late Adulthood. A useful analogy is cancer. There are many types of cancer that vary in terms of location and cause, but all are caused by uncontrolled growth of cell tissue. The most common type of dementia is Alzheimer's disease, which accounts for 50 to 70% of dementia cases, followed by vascular dementia and Lewy body dementia. Alzheimer's Association 2024. Lethin 2019. Nyong'o et al. 2022. Sheltons et al. 2021. Tahami Monfared et al. 2022. Some individuals can be diagnosed with multiple forms of dementia. Vascular dementia. Vascular dementia is the second most common form of dementia. Alzheimer's disease, the most common, is discussed later. Vascular dementia's cognitive symptoms and declines are associated with blocked blood flow to the brain, typically the result of a stroke, that results in cell damage or death in the affected part of the brain. There are two major types of stroke. An ischemic stroke occurs when a blood clot prevents an area of the brain from receiving enough blood or oxygen. While ischemic strokes can be fatal, they can also occur as less severe mini-strokes that disrupt blood flow for only a short time, resulting in less severe symptoms that can sometimes go undetected. A hemorrhagic stroke tends to be more severe, often with a sudden onset, and is much more likely to be fatal. A blood vessel in the brain ruptures, resulting in bleeding that deprives an area of the brain of sufficient blood flow and oxygen. All types of strokes are associated with a high risk of vascular dementia. However, not all stroke victims experience it. Calaria et al., 2016. The cognitive problems associated with vascular dementia can occur suddenly or slowly worsen over time. Their nature varies widely, depending on the area of the brain that was affected. For example, a left hemisphere stroke is more likely to produce difficulty with speech, because the left hemisphere typically contains the parts of the brain important for language use. Strokes often produce other symptoms, such as problems with balance and motor control and paralysis on one side of the body. Insufficient flow of blood related to heart conditions, including heart failure, can result in hypoxia, which occurs when lack of oxygen damages body tissues. When this occurs in brain tissue, it can also contribute to vascular dementia. Calabrese et al., 2016. Risk factors for strokes, heart disease, and vascular dementia are all similar and include lack of exercise, an unhealthy diet, smoking, high alcohol consumption, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. Like the symptoms of stroke, cognitive problems associated with vascular dementia can improve over time if the underlying cause of the stroke or heart condition is addressed and no further damage to the brain occurs. If disruptions in blood flow continue, the dementia will also likely worsen. Alzheimer's Association, NDA. Life hacks. Recognizing signs of a stroke. A stroke is a medical emergency, and the speed of response matters for many reasons. Stroke victims who are quickly treated in a hospital setting have a better chance of immediate survival and fewer physical limitations afterward. National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, NHLBI, 2023. Saver et al., 2013. They also demonstrate better cognitive outcomes. Healthcare experts recommend using the acronym FAST, sometimes BFAST, to remember and identify the signs of a stroke. Consider it a medical emergency if you or someone you know experiences any of these common symptoms. Geiger, 2021. NHLBI, 2023. B. Problems with balance or coordination. Eye problem, such as a sudden onset of blurred or double vision or complete loss of vision. F. Facial drooping or an uneven facial expression. A. Arm weakness, numbness, or inability to raise both arms to an equal height. S. Hard to understand speech, slurred speech, or difficulty speaking. T. It's time to call for emergency medical services if a person has any one of the previous symptoms. These symptoms can often, but not always, be obvious. Women sometimes have different stroke symptoms than men, such as confusion, headache, or chest pain. So unusual sudden symptoms of any type should be addressed quickly, even if they don't initially fit the typical pattern. Ali et al., 2022. Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's disease. Lewy body dementia is the third most common type of dementia. It's caused by deposits of a specific protein found in the cortex of the brain, figure 15.19. These protein deposits, called Lewy bodies, have been linked to loss of the neurons responsible for producing neurochemicals, such as acetylcholine, which plays a role in attention, learning, and memory, and dopamine, related to experiencing pleasure, motivation, sleep, and cognition. The most common symptoms of Lewy body dementia are visual hallucinations, difficulty paying attention, and difficulty with thinking and judgment. These tend to change drastically over short periods of time, going from nearly non-existent to severe and back again without any apparent reason. Other symptoms are related to motor skills and include stiffness, slow movement, and shaking. Orad and Shiner 2022. Lewy body dementia is difficult to predict because its cause is unclear. Though the risk increases with age, research has not identified any behavioral or lifestyle risk factors. The condition is progressive and fatal, with no effective treatment or cure. Parkinson's disease is also characterized by damage to the neurons responsible for dopamine production and shares many of the physical symptoms of Lewy body dementia, such as stiffness, shaking/trembling, and slow movement. Many patients with Parkinson's disease never develop dementia, however, and others do so only in the disease's later stages. Research indicates there is a connection and overlap between Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's disease dementia, as they both involve the same Lewy body proteins. However, work is still being done to understand this relationship. Hayter et al. 2023, Huang 2023, National Institute on Aging 2021. Alzheimer's disease. Estimates indicate that roughly 55 million people worldwide have Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's Association 2024. The most common form of dementia. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive and fatal form of dementia that affects memory first, before limiting other cognitive abilities and eventually motor skills. Typical life expectancy varies because people are diagnosed at different stages of the disease, but most live 6 to 10 years after noticeable symptoms develop. Sheltons et al. 2021. Its combination of genetic, environmental, and lifestyle factors make Alzheimer's disease very difficult to predict. The biggest risk factor is age, especially after 80 years. Generally, a healthy diet, regular exercise, and not smoking can reduce the likelihood of developing the disease. Sheltons et al. 2021. Characteristics and diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Currently, the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease relies on a combination of clinical observations and medical testing. Professionals can distinguish between a clinical diagnosis based on symptoms and performance on cognitive tests, and a biological diagnosis based on the presence of certain pathological elements in brain tissue. You'll learn about the latter approach first. The amyloid plaques characteristic of the disease are believed to form in the brain due to elevated levels of a naturally occurring protein called amyloid precursor protein. As levels of this protein increase, fragments of it gather between neurons, forming plaques that have been linked to cell death, and are also believed to interfere with the functioning of neurons. Within the neurons of people with Alzheimer's disease, threads of the naturally occurring protein tau become twisted, forming neurofibrillary tangles that can interfere with cellular functioning and also contribute to cell death. Alzheimer's Association 2024. National Institute on Aging 2017. Figure 15.20. Death of brain tissue in certain areas, especially the hippocampus, Jack et al. 2018, also occurs. These changes appear with increasing frequency in most individuals as they get older. They may be an aspect of primary aging and typically do not interfere with functioning. However, as they increase beyond what's considered normative, they may produce MCI and eventually Alzheimer's disease. Gans et al. 2018, Guiazet et al. 2003, Tahami Monford et al. 2022. An example of secondary aging. Changes in the body's insulin response may also be a factor. The risk of type 2 diabetes increases with age, and people with type 2 diabetes consistently show cognitive declines. Some research has thus proposed the existence of type 3 diabetes caused by neurons in the brain becoming insulin resistant. However, this is not currently an official medical diagnosis, and it's unclear whether the association between insulin resistance and dementia is caused by diabetes damaging neurons, or whether a variant of the APOE4 gene, sometimes called the Alzheimer's gene, interferes with the way the brain processes insulin. Janotova et al. 2022, Zhao et al. 2017. An issue with the biological diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is that traditionally, detecting the presence of plaques and tangles required examining the patient's brain tissue under a microscope, which could be done only at autopsy. Dead brain tissue can be detected on living patients' brain scans, but can be caused by several different factors, so this imaging isn't specific enough to indicate Alzheimer's disease. Jack et al. 2024. This is why many cases of Alzheimer's disease are diagnosed through clinical means. The clinical diagnosis rules out other potential causes, like stroke, looks for the presence or absence of certain symptoms like visual hallucinations, and compiles a medical history to check for factors like previous head injuries, chronic alcoholism, or untreated infections, all of which can produce dementia symptoms. This strategy typically leads to a diagnosis of probable or possible Alzheimer's disease, but it isn't always accurate. Up to 30% of people with a clinical diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease don't have signs of plaques and tangles, and a similar percentage of people with plaques and tangles never develop symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Jack et al., 2018. It's estimated that Alzheimer's disease may go undiagnosed as much as 50% of the time. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. Tahami Monferd et al., 2022. However, the diagnostic approach may be changing. Technology now exists to identify the presence of amyloid and tau proteins in cerebrospinal fluid, and positron emission tomography scans can locate amyloid plaques in the brain. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. A blood test to detect amyloid protein is also being developed. Barthelemy et al., 2024. Schindler et al., 2019. Genetic testing can identify people at increased risk for Alzheimer's disease, and professionals can use that information to closely monitor their cognitive health. In the near future, scientists may be able to rely more on biological diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease and achieve more accurate results. Jack et al., 2018. Sheltons et al., 2021. Types of Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease may exist in different forms. Early onset disease is a very rare form characterized, as its name suggests, by symptoms that occur earlier than typical, before age 65 years, and sometimes decades earlier. This version has been associated with specific risk factors, such as having Down syndrome. Other cases have been linked to mutations of 3 different dominant genes, and thus appear to be entirely genetic. Having a parent with this type of early onset Alzheimer's disease gives you a 50% chance of carrying one of the genes and developing the disease at a younger age than typical. These genetic variations also appear to be more common in Black individuals than in white and Indigenous individuals. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. While routine genetic screening does not test for the genes, people with a strong family history of Alzheimer's disease at young ages can be tested to see whether they carry them. National Institute on Aging, 2023. Most cases of Alzheimer's disease are considered late onset and occur after age 65 years. Risk increases with age, and 80% of all Alzheimer's patients are diagnosed after age 80 years. This form of the disease is more difficult to predict, but it is also associated with a slower progression of symptoms and changes to the brain than early onset Alzheimer's disease. Rabinovich, 2019. Symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease. Memory problems are usually the first symptom of Alzheimer's disease, although it can be hard to distinguish them from the typical memory problems associated with normal aging. In general, forgetting things a person has known for a long time, like the names of loved ones, or the route home from the store, or having a noticeable increase in forgetfulness, is cause for concern. Some research suggests that problems in word recall, remembering the names of objects and people, and orientation, knowing where you are, as well as things like the date and season, are specific early indicators of dementia, coming before impairment of other cognitive functions like attention and executive function. Tahami Monferd et al., 2022. Several large-scale research studies are currently trying to better grasp all aspects of Alzheimer's disease. For example, the Dallas Lifespan Brain Study is studying brain development at a wide range of ages, with the goal of better understanding both the risk factors for and the early development of Alzheimer's. Chan et al., 2014. 2 other examples are the Religious Orders Study, which has a sample of nuns and priests, and the Rush Memory and Aging Project. Both examine cognitive ability, brain health, and other variables in differently aged adults over time. All participants also agree to organ donation after death, so that irregularities in the brain, such as plaques and tangles, can be studied and associated with brain activity, cognitive functioning, and a variety of other variables. Bennett et al., 2018. Thanks to these and other efforts, researchers understand a great deal about the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease. Several studies have identified neurological changes that occur several years before any symptoms. For example, research using PET scans has been able to identify changes in brain activity 4 years before participants developed any symptoms. These include a pattern of more activity in the frontal cortex of the brain and less in the temporal and parietal cortexes. The declines in the temporal and parietal cortexes are believed to signal some of the earliest damage to the brain in the Alzheimer's disease process. Figure 15.21. Increased activity in the frontal cortex, in turn, is believed to be evidence of neuroplasticity occurring as healthier parts of the brain compensate for the damaged area. Biesenheld et al. 2013, Chowdhury et al. 2023, Raskin et al. 2015. More recent research using magnetic resonance imaging has supported this earlier work, indicating that people eventually diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease show more loss of neurons in the temporal lobe than in other regions of the brain. Other types of dementia are characterized by other patterns of neuron loss. For example, Lewy body dementia appears to disproportionately affect the parietal lobe, Orad and Shiner, 2022. In other words, before people have any cognitive or behavioral symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, the brain seems to realize that certain areas are being damaged. As a result, the frontal lobes start working extra hard to pick up the slack, preventing any noticeable changes in cognitive ability. This trend continues until the damage accumulates and the frontal cortex is no longer able to compensate. Eventually, the frontal cortex starts to experience damage from Alzheimer's disease as well. Indicators of Alzheimer's disease have been found outside the brain. Research suggests that declines in the sense of smell can predict a level of Alzheimer's disease-related pathology in the brain, such as the presence of plaques and tangles. Bray et al. 2020, M.I. et al. 2023, Wilson et al. 2009. Amyloid that forms plaques has also been found in the retina of the eye, and its presence positively correlates with the degree of cognitive decline. Coronio et al. 2023. While changes in the brain, declines in the sense of smell, and the presence of amyloid in the eyes are potentially important clinical indicators of Alzheimer's disease, they are not the typical changes that families first notice. In early-stage Alzheimer's disease, individuals may have increased memory problems, such as difficulty finding the right words, forgetting information they recently learned, and more frequently forgetting where they left objects, but typically they can still function independently. The middle stage of the disease is the longest, typically lasting several years, during which individuals require some assistance completing daily tasks. Memory problems are more severe, including difficulty remembering information relevant to their personal history. This stage of Alzheimer's is also linked to general confusion, wandering, sleep difficulty, difficulty with daily tasks such as bathing and dressing, and personality changes. Another symptom common in mid-stage Alzheimer's disease is sundowning, a tendency for dementia symptoms to worsen in the evening. Individuals tend to become increasingly confused or agitated. They may pace or wander, exhibit increased aggression, and experience hallucinations, typically as night approaches but also throughout the night. Sundowning is frequently reported in institutional settings such as nursing homes. It is not completely understood, and there are a variety of theories about its potential causes. Cipriani et al. 2015. Communicating earlier in the day with loved ones who have dementia could increase the likelihood of having meaningful interactions. The final stage of disease is the most debilitating. People have difficulty communicating or having conversations. They need assistance with ADLs, and they cannot independently care for themselves. Physical abilities also tend to decline, and individuals can lose the ability to walk, sit, or even swallow. Vulnerability to infectious disease such as pneumonia also increases. Due to the severity and scope of these symptoms, end-of-life care such as hospice is often needed. Alzheimer's Association (NDB). Treatment and prevention of Alzheimer's disease. A great deal of Alzheimer's research has focused on developing effective treatments, including medications meant to remove amyloid plaques from the brain. Shrivastava et al. 2021. Since their accumulation is believed to lead to the development of tangles. While most attempts have so far failed, some medications, such as aducanumab, Aduhelm, decrease amyloid plaques and reduce the rate of cognitive decline. Aducanumab was the first medication to receive FDA approval in 2021. It did not reverse the disease but may have helped those at the earliest stages by slowing its progression. It had been linked to potentially serious side effects too, including swelling of the brain. Woloshin and Kesselheim 2022. This was the first medication to try to treat the disease, and not just provide symptom management. Bashir et al. 2022. Karan and Struper 2022. Wang 2023. However, research still has a long way to go in Alzheimer's treatment, as Aduhelm is being discontinued and will no longer be available by late 2024, Alzheimer's Association (NDC). Roberto never intended to keep working after he turned 60 years old, but at age 62 years, he's still a successful plumber with no signs of slowing down. He's delegated most of the harder physical work to his younger colleagues, but still does physical labor 2 days a week and runs the business from his office the other 3 days. He enjoys the challenges of responding to emergencies and investigating the sources of problems. as well as all the social interaction that goes with the job. Roberto has learned to balance his work and professional lives to prevent burnout, and he deliberately carves out time for family activities and participation in his mosque. Roberto and his family and coworkers agree that while he'll have to stop working eventually, there's no need for him to think about doing so right now. What does it mean to age successfully? Traditionally, researchers studying this question considered cognitive and physical health, social or productive activities, and level of functioning. Rowe and Kahn, 1997. They later included goals such as avoiding disability and adding longevity, and subjective factors like enjoying life. Vayant and Mukamal, 2001. Research has consistently identified 4 aspects of successful aging. Daniel, 2020. Rowe and Kahn, 1997. Kim and Park, 2017. Ertimo et al., 2019. They are health, physical ability, cognitive functioning, and psychological adaptation/social engagement. You'll learn about the first 3 in this section, and psychological adaptation/social engagement, in Chapter 16, Social and Emotional Development in Late Adulthood, age 60 and beyond. Research on successful physical aging and health. There is potentially good news when it comes to physical functioning and health in later life. Figure 15.22. For example, the concept of compression of morbidity suggests that a healthy lifestyle can extend life expectancy while decreasing time spent in poor health and/or a highly dependent state. Fries, 1983. In other words, having a healthy lifestyle may help us not only live longer, but also be healthier while doing so. In fact, improving health has better outcomes for the individual than simply prolonging life. Friedman, 2020. Jeevraj et al., 2020. And it also lowers healthcare costs. Hajat and Stein, 2018. Scott et al., 2021. It depends. Compression of morbidity. James Fries, 1983. First introduced the idea of compression of morbidity, a result that occurs when the average age of onset of chronic disease and disability increases at a faster rate than increases in life expectancy. In other words, people live a longer life while also experiencing fewer years in states of poor health and dependence. Such a trend could drastically reduce the costs associated with caring for a rapidly growing population of older adults while also improving their quality of life, allowing them to maintain their independence for longer than ever. Compression of morbidity was introduced as a theoretical concept, however. What do the data suggest? It turns out that it depends. Research related to compression of morbidity yields mixed results. Cremins and Beltran-Sanchez, 2010, conducted a review of research on some of the serious diseases common in late life and concluded that the data did not support compression of morbidity. Specifically, the age at which many health problems occurred stayed stable despite increasing life expectancy, and the amount of time people experienced disease and functional losses lengthened. The researchers' conclusion was that people are living longer with health and functional limitations rather than delaying the onset of these problems. Still, Fries and colleagues, 2011, point to multiple longitudinal studies, some focused on healthy aging interventions or very healthy samples, that do support the idea of decreasing disability in older age. On a societal level, however, many major disease processes appear not to follow the trend. Perhaps more large-scale efforts to minimize risk factors for older adults through active, healthy lifestyles could result in the compression of morbidity on a societal level. What factors might promote good health and physical ability in older people? It is well established that eating a diet high in fruits and vegetables, maintaining a healthy weight, ensuring proper hydration, and engaging in moderate or vigorous levels of exercise are all predictive of better physical health in later life. Buettner and Skemp, 2016. Evans and Sir Campbell, 1997. Herbert et al., 2022. Criuzzi et al., 2022. Poulain and Herm, 2022. Soa et al., 2016. Sleep that is good in quality and sufficient in duration has also been found to be predictive of better health in these years. McRae et al., 2008. Sivertson et al., 2021. Longitudinal research suggests that health-related tendencies and characteristics in middle adulthood, such as high blood pressure, are also predictive of later health outcomes. Parag-Kielo et al., 2009. Even childhood experiences have been correlated with health in later life. Older individuals who had experienced traumatic events in childhood, such as abuse or exposure to substance abuse, later had higher incidences of heart disease, cancer, and many other chronic health conditions. This positive correlation is likely due to a combination of socioeconomic factors and riskier health behaviors throughout the lifespan. Merrick et al., 2019. Another component of successful aging, Kim and Park, 2017, is maintaining physical functioning. Physical activity has been associated with many positive outcomes, such as better health, less stress, and better cognitive functioning. Current levels of physical activity may also predict future physical activity. Longitudinal research suggests that the combination of physical ability, activity, and nutrition in the earlier part of late adulthood is predictive of physical abilities and mobility, ability to walk. 10 years later. Idland et al., 2012. Reyes, 2020. Overall, research consistently suggests that the best thing you can do to increase the odds of aging successfully is to eat a healthy diet and exercise regularly. An unhealthy diet and sedentary lifestyle may even accelerate age-related declines in health and physical functioning. Intersections and contexts. Physical fitness in late adulthood. Many people associate aging with decreased physical activity. Is it therefore safe to assume that an older adult is likely to have a lot of limitations regarding what they can achieve physically? No. Many older adults exercise regularly and are in great physical shape. They may not be as capable as they were in their 20s, but they can maintain or even improve physical fitness well into later life. Largely, however, their success depends on how active they were in early and middle adulthood. It's easier to maintain fitness than create it. Physical activity can initially be uncomfortable and painful, but as the body gets used to activity, the pain and discomfort decrease. Older adults who aren't used to being active may thus need extra encouragement to keep up with it, especially since normative aging often brings joint pain and loss of flexibility and stamina. While ordinary exercise and physical activity appear sufficient to keep most people healthy, some strive to achieve impressive physical accomplishments during their later years. The Appalachian Trail is a backpacking hike that stretches nearly 2,200 miles, starting in Georgia and ending in Maine. People who attempt the entire trail in 1 year, which requires hiking consistently for about 6 months and averaging 14 to 20 miles a day, are considered thru hikers. Only 1 in 4 thru hikers successfully complete this challenging trek. Appalachian Trail Conservancy, 2022. An 83-year-old going by the trail name of Nimble Will Nomad recently broke the record of oldest successful thru hiker, set just 4 years earlier by a hiker calling himself Graybeard, then 82 years old. Research on brain health. How do we keep our brain healthy as we age? While behavioral and lifestyle characteristics have not been linked to early-onset Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body dementia, a recent comprehensive review of research estimated that around 40% of dementia cases were associated with risk factors like high blood pressure and obesity that can be minimized or controlled with a healthy diet and regular exercise. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. Livingston et al., 2020. Different characteristics across the lifespan are both predictive of dementia and changeable. Research by Livingston and colleagues, 2020, identifies which potentially modifiable risk factors are associated with different life stages, as well as the percentage reduction in dementia prevalence if that risk factor is eliminated. Table 15.3. For example, not smoking in late life reduces your risk of developing dementia by 5%. According to this research, about 40% of risk factors associated with developing dementia are potentially controllable, suggesting that throughout our lifespan, we can reduce our likelihood of experiencing it. These risk factors aren't exhaustive. Other potentially modifiable risk factors for dementia are sleep problems, vitamin deficiencies, and poor oral health. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. Crane et al., 2013. Livingston et al., 2020. Nianogo et al., 2022. Zhang et al., 2021. Many of these can affect aspects of health other than cognitive functioning, so addressing any of them may benefit us in multiple ways. In some cases, we don't even need a formal diagnosis to have increased dementia risk. For example, some research has demonstrated that even in people who do not have diabetes, higher blood glucose levels are associated with higher dementia risk. Crane et al., 2013. Thus, controlling factors such as diet and activity levels and keeping blood glucose levels in a healthy range may lower dementia risk even if we don't develop diabetes. Another positive step, and one that might surprise you, is protecting your hearing throughout adulthood. Hearing loss may contribute to stress, social isolation, and lack of environmental stimulation, all of which are already linked to dementia. Huang et al., 2023. Zhang et al., 2021. Hearing loss has also been associated with cognitive decline and an increase in dementia risk. Livingston et al. 2020. Nianogo et al. 2022. Zhang et al. 2021. The reason for this connection is unknown, but hearing loss may be indicative of underlying problems with brain functioning, and therefore a symptom of dementia rather than a cause. Regardless of the cause, treating hearing loss, usually with hearing aids, can lower a person's risk of dementia. Livingston et al. 2020, Nianogo et al. 2022, Zhang et al. 2021. Someone showing memory problems and confusion should have their hearing tested before assuming dementia may exist. They may simply not hear what others are saying. Given the same number of dementia-related changes to the brain, some individuals may exhibit greater resistance to damage than others. These people have more cognitive reserve, characteristics that are protective against dementia by delaying onset and reducing symptoms. People with higher educational and occupational attainment earlier in life tend to have greater cognitive reserve, experiencing slower decline if they develop dementia, and with less severe symptoms. One potential explanation is that higher levels of education are predictive of higher verbal ability, which decreases the risk of dementia. Boyle et al. 2021, Nianogo et al. 2022, Tucker and Stern 2011, Zhang et al. 2021. However, this also means that people who get less education, particularly those who don't complete high school, are at increased risk of dementia. This is particularly important for people of low socioeconomic status and marginalized groups such as people of color, who may lack opportunities to receive education. Nianogo et al. 2022. High levels of aerobic exercise and cognitively stimulating activities have been found to increase cognitive reserve. Cheng, 2016. Nianogo et al. 2022. Zhang et al. 2021. As have engagement in creative activities and an active social life in later ages. Hans Doltier et al. 2022. Zhang et al. 2021. Figure 15.23. These may not only decrease the risk of experiencing dementia, they could also minimize the severity of any dementia a person has. Research on successful cognitive aging. Many of the behaviors that help prevent dementia are also related to minimizing normative cognitive declines, as well as enhancing overall health. For example, aerobic exercise is especially beneficial for slowing cognitive aging and maintaining cognitive ability. Gomez, Pinilla, and Hillman, 2013. Nianogo et al., 2022. Zhang et al., 2021. Education, social engagement, giving up or avoiding smoking, and managing weight and blood glucose levels are also linked with successful cognitive aging. Alzheimer's Association, 2024. Nianogo et al., 2022. Zhang et al., 2021. These actions may benefit us in several ways. For example, participating in hobbies may reduce stress, provide cognitive stimulation, and increase and strengthen our social network, any one of which can be considered protective. Choi, 2019, Zhang et al., 2021. Some research has suggested that following diets that are plant-based and/or low in fat, sugar, and sodium may be beneficial. Zhang et al., 2023. One example is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, DASH diet, NHLBI, 2006, which emphasizes eating foods high in calcium, fiber, magnesium, potassium, and protein, and low in salt and saturated fat. Although the DASH diet was initially developed to help people lower their blood pressure and cholesterol, some evidence exists that it may be helpful for promoting healthy cognitive function. Zhang et al., 2021, Figure 15.24. Cognitive changes are minimal and specific to certain aspects of our cognition for most adults age 60 and beyond. In fact, research suggests that while cognitive changes are common, they are not universal or inevitable. For example, while fluid abilities tend to peak near the beginning of early adulthood before starting a steady decline, this trajectory may be somewhat avoidable. Some research supports the use it or lose it idea, which says fluid abilities start declining because we stop practicing them, just when we're completing our formal education perhaps, while we tend to maintain or improve other cognitive skills we frequently use. Holch et al. 1999, Van Balkum et al. 2020. Consistent with this idea, older adults tend to rely more on crystallized abilities when solving problems, while younger adults lean toward fluid abilities. Artistico et al. 2019, Chen et al. 2017. If, however, we look for opportunities to use our fluid abilities, we may be able to prevent or at least slow the decline. For example, think back to the opening story in 15.3, Cognition and Memory in Late Adulthood, about Ahmad, who began volunteering but had no crystallized skills or knowledge to rely on. Instead, this activity required the use of fluid abilities to learn and apply new information. Is it possible to use training programs to improve cognitive functioning, as physical exercise programs improve physical functioning? In general, it might be. In a research context, cognitive training programs typically ask participants to complete structured tasks such as recalling short lists of words, distinguishing between similar-sounding words, following a sequence of instructions, and identifying the pattern in a series of numbers. Ball et al. 2002, Monkey et al. 2006. Sometimes the tasks are similar to everyday activities, such as reading a map or remembering items on a shopping list. Ball et al. 2002. More recently, researchers have explored using video games as cognitive training exercises. Belchior et al. 2019, Clemenson et al. 2020, Shu et al. 2020. Results show that cognitive training programs and games that require coordinating multiple skills can be effective in improving older adults' performance on abilities that typically decline in later years, such as inductive reasoning, episodic memory, and even processing speed, and participants maintain these benefits over time. Ball et al. 2002, Belchior et al. 2019, Bonacher et al. 2021, Bonacher et al. 2021, Clemenson et al. 2020. However, while cognitive training and brain games websites have been shown to improve processing speed and cognitive performance in older adults, stimulation through social interaction and participation in enjoyable activities is likely to be more realistically attainable and equally, if not more, beneficial. Kuster et al. 2016.